I'm very honored to introduce our next speaker, Trina Cunningham. She's a spokesperson for and leader with the Mountain Maidu. She's worked with them to try to bring the voice of the Maidu people into the conversations about restoring resilience to our region. Trina has played a very important role, especially in bringing disadvantaged community and underrepresented community people into integrated water management planning, into disadvantaged community assessment. Trina has studied for years at Cal State Chico and brings to us knowledge of, if you will, our people and her people. She's half Welsh, quarter Welsh?
My great-great-grandfather was Welsh.
She's a little bit Welsh and a lot Maidu. I am very honored to introduce Trina, who will be bringing us her perspective on water.
Momoli, momoli, tie-undi, tie-undi, tie-undi. Momoli, momoli, tie-undi, tie-undi, tie-undi. Momoli, momoli, tie-undi, tie-undi, tie-undi. Momoli, momoli, tie-undi, tie. Oh. The Mountain Maidu are from the Upper Feather River watershed. For those of you that may not know where that is, that's all of the water that drains into Lake Oroville. It's the southernmost of the Cascade Ranges and the northernmost of the Sierra Nevadas. And that song is the sound of that place. It's the noise that that place makes. It's the conversation that that place makes. And it's the wisdom that that place gives. And it's the spiritual guidance that we continue to follow. Momoli, momi means water in our native language. Momoli means the water that's moving. Tai means something to the west. In Yandi are the mountains. And so that water is, that song is of the water from the beginning of the crest of the mountains as it travels continuously and repeats the pattern, continues the energy, continues the flow, repeats itself again and again and again until it reaches the ocean. Tai Yandi is the place far, far to the ocean, to the west of these mountains. So the water travels and it continues that song and it continues that power as it travels through the landscape. It enters the ocean and it continues to travel back up to the mountains. And so as it continues to repeat those cycles and to repeat life, it gathers energy and power through everything else that it travels. So that becomes a foundation for us on how we're going to be in this world. And as we look at cycles and patterns, we can look at them as largely or smally as we so choose, knowing that it will always bring us back to large and small. So some of the concepts that I've struggled with over the past, all my life, as being a Native person, is identity, of course. As a Native person, having survived and having had my family survive in our landscape continuously through many, many, many changes, it's brought about a resilience that we live every day. Every day of our lives is a struggle, and it's also a celebration. If we looked at these landscapes and the decisions that other people have made that affect them, that has been a struggle and is to this very day. I so appreciate all of the speakers this morning because each of you spoke to something that is so dear and precious to my heart, and it's incredibly inspiring to hear the intellect, the passion, and the desire to move forward, and in ways of how to balance current society with ancient wisdom. One of those things that I struggle with is the whole concept of water management. or landscape management. To me, as a Native person, understanding the cyclical nature of water and landscapes, of the geomorphology of the earth, of the universe, I have a hard time understanding how it is that we're going to manage water, when in fact I really think we're managing how we interact with water and what the potential of reciprocity would actually mean in a cost-benefit analysis or other factors of decision-making. So we can become really playful with that and bring humor into it, as I so like to do. What are we really managing? Are we managing water, or is water managing us? So then I think also about water equity. We talk a lot about social and environmental justice, but what about the premise of being equitable to water, because water exists before and after us? What would water equity look like? And when we make our decisions on land use, we can look at mining, and we can look at timber operations, we can look at other extraction industries. But as we look at agricultural uses and other things, maybe it would help if those decisions were guided by what is healthy for water. And so if it's healthy for water, with the huge amount of intellect that I've heard this morning and had the opportunity to have other conversations already today with, I think that we possibly could achieve some sort of balance within that. And that's very exciting to me, and it's very promising. One of the other things that we're guided by are the stories that I've heard all of my life. And I realize and completely recognize that we are a fragmented society, and ourselves are on the verge of extinction, having only 5 fluent speakers left in our culture, in our language. And so that's been interesting to grapple with too. We have the Endangered Species Act, but we don't have the Endangered Human Act yet. And some people actually think it's a good thing. But we've been guided by stories of, in my lifetime, I've had the opportunity to listen to my elders and to listen deeply, whether I wanted to or not. And now I've come to a full appreciation of wanting to even more. But we've heard stories all of my life about fire and how fire is going to overtake our world. And the next destruction in the cycle of the world is through fire. We've heard about earth tilt, and with the earth tilt and the changing of the poles, many fantastic things can happen, and the energies will change, and some of them will be incredibly fantastic. We've heard about water rise, and that places are going to be inundated. And so to me, I'm astounded that in my short lifespan, something that I heard as a child that sounded absolutely ridiculous, and so maybe that's partly why I didn't give it credibility when the elders spoke at that point, is happening. And it's pretty incredible to me. We've heard about atmospheric changes. That's something that we haven't seen as much yet, because within those atmospheric changes, they talk about winds that will never stop, and even the changes of coloration within the atmosphere. It's a little bit scary because it's an unknown, but it has been prophesied. So these are things that Native people around the world, indigenous peoples from all around the world that still have a strong and true connection to their place, can bring into science and to bring into communities and to help build knowledge and resilience to those places in partnership. along that line, one of the concepts that I've been pondering for about the last 8 to 10 years is I live in the forests of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and I love being there, and I love the wilderness of it, and I love camping, fasting, hiking 4 days at a time, and not seeing another person. And I love going to San Francisco, and I love coming to Sacramento, and I love the urban spaces. And so I started looking more at the discrepancies between the two of those places. Lots of people, lots of voting, a lot more infrastructure, a lot more capacity, at least seemingly to my untrained rural eye. And I started listening to kids from San Diego when we brought them up to the mountains and they saw the stars for the first time. I started listening to their fears of being in a rural place, and I realized that we are the same. We fear the unknown. I thought I got lost here in Sacramento one time, and I took some streets, and it got so scary at one point because it was a pretty rundown part of the city that I was at a stoplight and there was nobody else around, and I didn't stop at the red light because it was scary. I was like, I'd rather pay a ticket than stop at this red light because it was scary to me. And it's the same fear that some of the urban people have when they come to our areas of, it's so quiet and I have to be with myself. And there's wild things, wild animals, aren't you afraid? And it's like, absolutely not, I'm more afraid of the people. But as I spent time in the forest, hiking with my children or my family or my friends, I started looking around at the forest and the health of the forests and what that meant. And one of my youngest son and I, we would walk through this canopy of trees, and we would be able to just push against a tree and it would fall right over. This tree was being outcompeted by its environment. It wasn't getting adequate nutrition, adequate sunlight, and the adequate help that it needed within this forest. And it started breaking my heart because I thought about not stopping at that stoplight because I was afraid. Look at what the environment had produced in people who didn't have access to enough resources to survive in a healthy way. There was no optimalization of health. And here I was in this forest that I love so dearly that had no optimization of health. And so it occurred to me that this was a ghetto, this was a forest ghetto. And that has resounded deeply in me since. And so when we look at rural areas, we need help as far as capacity building and infrastructure. And those are ways that the rural and urban areas can assist each other. We already know that the rural areas, as far as water, timber, and other resources, help urban areas tremendously. But I would really like to see more reciprocity within that. And also, to engage tribal people. We're ready and we're here, but there are very little opportunities or job descriptions for us to do the work that we need to do within our communities. We're willing to come to the science community. We're ready, and we need that. So I would ask, as you're developing organizations and agencies, as you're building land management plans, or reach out to your tribal people, build capacity within your funding to pay these people. They are experts. We are experts at what we do. So when I think about water, and that has become my life path because water is everything, I would just ask that you remember to celebrate it at every moment and to treat it like it is your life. Thank you.